Hey, everybody, we're live, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in last night. We're talking about the verdict, of course, but then also we're talking about the Raiders and Mark Davis and everything else. But
This
for
is
tuning in last
more
night, we're talking about
special.
the
It's so
verdict,
special
of
that I
course,
have
but then also
actually
we're talking
repeated
about
twice.
the Raiders and Mark Davis and everything else. But
This
for
is
tuning in,
more. And the reason I have repeated twice, aside from memory, making it memorable, is I haven't seen this man in, John, how long has it been?
Too many years, my friend. Probably we're looking about maybe 30 years.
Yeah, we're in the decades. we are in. We are proudly into decades. It is my pleasure to introduce my longtime friend, who actually, John, you talked about being. Do you realize you talked about doing what you're doing when we were in college?
I do recall that, yes. I do remember, and I remember a lot of great conversations that you and I had when we were in school. And
Yeah.
I treasure those memories.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. And John has always been a legal scholar, even before he was a legal scholar. He is now a partner and founder in Hodge and Shergold Attorneys at Law and Mediation in Brownsville, Texas. And John, talk about your firm and your areas of practice and where you're at.
Sure. Zenny, great again to see you. The fact is, I've been practicing licensed in the state of Texas since 1995. Been a few years since then. And presently, I have been owner and proud partner in a firm that's really, if you think about it, it's really about defending individuals for civil rights. I'm a civil rights attorney. I represent employees. So, for example, most of my cases and jury trials revolve around wrongful terminations, individuals who allege that they were let go because of age motivation of their employer, individuals who make a police report, they work for a governmental entity, they become whistleblowers, and then get fired and retaliated against. Other cases are folks who basically make reports or write a statement that get retaliated against for their First Amendment rights, but under the federal statute that prohibits that. Anytime you get into trouble with your employer or you get into a civil rights issue, I usually get the call. Been doing it for many years. I started out as a prosecutor for 6 to 8 years. Tried everything from a murder case down to traffic tickets. I've been in private practice now for better part now of 20. My goodness, it's not as long as when we last spoke, but it's been a long time. I've been in private practice for about 20 years, and before that, I worked in the government sector, like most young attorneys who graduate at the city, county, and also the state level. So I've been very, very fortunate with my career, and I got some petrol left in the tank. I really enjoy my. I don't think it's work. I go to work. It's fun to be able to represent people who need the equalizer. Hate to use the movie Equalizer. I love Denzel Washington, by the way. I wish I had his fame and I had his looks and money, but this is what I got. So, but anyway, I kind of look at myself. I kind of look at as myself as an equalizer, and we live in the greatest country in the world. Despite the fact that Donald Trump was president for 4 years and I didn't vote for him. I'm a white guy, but I didn't vote for Donald Trump. So don't blame me for it. Okay. But anyway, the bottom line is that I really enjoy my work, and I enjoy being able to, get a jury picked and have that decision come back from time to time where you see a jury will say, yes, that person was let go of their position because they were 70 years old and replaced by 25-year-old. Or yes, that person, was retaliated against because he made a police report against a supervisor at a governmental job and he was fired afterwards. These are things that really, you see the families at the end of the day and you realize that you've made a difference. It makes you realize that you're in the right job.
I think, and because I want to ask you before I ask about the Chauvin trial and George Floyd, can you describe the area that
you live and work in? Because we talked about off camera, and give people a picture of where you're at.
Yes. Well, let me just kind of go back and how did I get here? I'm born and raised in Texas. I tell people I was born in North Texas and I'll die in South Texas. But as you know, Texas is a big state. I had graduated from law school, and when I did, I had worked in the state legislature. I don't think you may know this, maybe you do. I worked for the dean of the Democratic Party back in the mid 1990s. His name was Senator Dole Willis. He was the civil rights icon of state politics in Texas. Matter of fact, he was the person who wrote the civil service statute in 1948. He was my neighbor when I was a child. He was like a grandfather figure for me. And when I graduated from law school, he called me up and he said, young man, he said, I've been watching you for most of your life. I watched you play basketball, watched you graduate from high school and college, and now I want to see if you want to get a job with me down in Austin. So my career actually started at that point. Yeah, there is my glamour picture. That's when I actually that was my Photoshop photograph. Anyway, great how computers make you look. And thank God for computers. They made me look human. Anyway, so I went ahead and learned a lot from him. And when I got down to South Texas, it was because of my geographical area, it was expected for me to switch political parties. My boss was the dean of the Democratic Party, and I was expected to switch parties in my hometown of Fort Worth, Texas, by the power brokers that were in power at the time. I was probably in my late 20s, and I told one gentleman who told me that I would need to switch parties to get a job with his governmental office. I told him that if I did that, my mother would disown me. So I got on a bus. I came down to South Texas. I haven't looked back ever since. God works in mysterious ways. As you know, Zenny, we've had these conversations over the years. The Zen and the Zane, whether life is predestined. You and I have talked sometimes 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning on these things. While we should have been studying for our exams, but that's another thing. Oh, by the way, you were great at calling those. I still remember all those football plays that you would write to the Dallas Cowboys. I thought that they would have won at least 5 more Super Bowls if they had listened to your play calling. But that's a side note. Anyway, I came down to South Texas and been here ever since. And it's a great place to live. We call it the Rio Grande Valley. I live in Brownsville, Texas, just a little bit north of there. And we have McAllen, which is out to the west, Harlingen to the north. We have the island. We live right by the ocean. We have, 10, 15 minutes from where I live, the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, we've got a tremendous diversity. The people here are great. We have folks from up north, from south. We all kind of intermingle here. It's a cross culture. My Spanish is not like it should be, but es fácil escuchar español más difícil hablar español.
I've seen you give
it's easier to speak Spanish than it is to understand Spanish and to speak it. But my wife, she's Hispanic, and when she gets mad at me, she speaks a lot of Spanish, and I've learned quite frequently how to understand what she's telling me to get back into her good graces. But it is a very interesting place that I wound up and lives in. It really is. It's really given me a very great opportunity to progress with my profession and also with people that I have met along the way here. And it's a really nice place to raise a family. I have 2 kids now, and it's just a wonderful place to be. And the cost of living here is very reasonable. So, and of course. Everybody from California is moving to Texas. That's because the prices in California are getting high, and so before too much longer, all the Californians are going to make our prices go up. So we need more folks in moving to Texas, and hopefully we'll be able to have a more diverse political landscape here. As you know, Texas has been predominantly a red state. I'm a blue collar. Democrat, and if you hear my baby knocking on the door, that's her. So everybody out there, that's a little Carolyn. But we have more demographics. for example, more folks that come in from California, that's good for the Democratic Party in the state of Texas. I welcome more folks from California, more folks from other areas of the country, because those folks are basically bringing in more progressive, more thought-provoking discussion, and we've become real close. We're only 3-4 percentage points away. Beto O'Rourke almost took the Senate seat here not too long ago from, I won't mention the Caribbean cruise, but anyway, we went out of power for 4 days, and
I was going to ask you about that.
Well, that's another story in itself. I mean, Texas is the energy state of the world, right? I mean, you lived in Texas, you know how it is. Cowboy hats, oil wells. I mean, we have all the power, all the energy, and yet, most of the state went back into the ice age for 4 days. I mean, my house, we had no power for 4 days. I have an 86-year-old mom who I take care of in my house. She moved in with me. Fortunately, I had a generator, and I was able to start, and we were very fortunate because we're one of the few folks that had that. But this is why Texas is needing more progressive thought processes, because the energy grid was in the hands of a few special interest groups. ERCOT was the name. I'm sure you've studied this. ERCOT was pretty much unregulated as the state power grid. It was almost like, you pull the plug and it's gone. And so that's what happens when you don't reinvest into a power system and you try to do it on the cheap. So yes, Texas is, I believe, in an upswing progressively. And I do believe that we're going to see Texas become blue probably in the next 2 to 4 years, based on the geographic migration of people coming from other states.
I'm going to ask you, because that's actually segues into everything else in an odd sense, but what did you think of first of all, the George Floyd murder and the Derek Chauvin trial and the verdict?
Well, again, being a former prosecutor and being on the defense end, I did criminal defense and criminal prosecution as well in my earlier days. That the case has to be proved, and this is so redundant. A case has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Maybe we hear that, over ad nauseum. I thought the prosecution for the state of Minnesota, just based on what I could see a little bit on the TV when I'm not changing diapers, but it seems to me that they did a very good job in presenting their case. I thought the prosecutor for the state made a great closing when he said it. The problem wasn't because of Mr. Floyd's heart being too big. It was the fact that the officer, his heart was too small, and that was very powerful. I think that will go down as one of probably the most fantastic closing statements that a prosecutor's ever made. It resonated. Sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment and you're prosecuting, the right words come to your head. I don't know if he thought about that and said it, or was it something it came to him at the time. I would suspect that he probably prepared it, but regardless of how it came out, I thought it was beautifully stated, and I think it devastated. It took all the oxygen out of the defense at that point, and I thought the defense, I think they did the best they could with what they had. I don't fault the defense attorney for what happened as far as the verdict. He was doing what he thought was in his best interest of his client, and he zealously represented him. But you can't explain away someone having a knee on someone's throat back of the neck for 9 minutes and 25 seconds, or however long it was. It's disgusting to have seen that in the country, to live through it. But it's also reassuring because the justice system in this instance prevailed. It never, and I don't have the authority to say these things because I'm not African American. No, African American people have been victimized for many, many generations, and so I really don't have a license to really talk about that subject. But I will tell you, as a progressive Democrat and Anglo, coming from the school of thought, the first television show or first television memory I have was the tragic assassination of Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. I remember my mother and my dad, bawling their eyes out, crying, tears. And I was like maybe 4 years old. And that really impacted my brain for many years to see my parents crying like that. And then as I grew up, I figured out who that gentleman was and what he stood for. And today I still get somewhat emotional because this country, as Robert F. Kennedy said, is a compassionate country. We're a good country where we have the capacity to love and show compassion. And when he gave a speech, I believe at Martin Luther King, when he was assassinated, and I believe it was in Indianapolis, that was the only place that no rioting took place. Kennedy made a speech, I think that was one of the best speeches. If no one's seen the speech, you can Google it. Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King speech on the day of his death. And you will see that he was talking about violence and uncontrolled violence and hatred, and that America is a compassionate country. We need to bring this together. I mean, what he talked about is the antithesis of what we have been living through for the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. When Trump got elected, it was really the antithesis. So I challenge everyone tonight or whenever, just Google Robert F. Kennedy and Google that speech he made about Martin Luther King. By the way, Martin Luther King, he used to say injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, we've seen a lot of injustice, especially with this human being that was just treated unmercifully by an individual and other individuals in that police department that stood idly by. I don't know. I think isn't it any 2 or 3 of the other police officers that were there? I think they were waiting to stand trial for accessory.
Yeah.
And they all should be brought to justice. And if I was their defense attorney, I would be trying to make a deal real quick.
Yeah, there's that guy that the short fellow that was just like serving them up or just basically keeping them away. And
I remember. Yeah, the gentleman that was sitting there was back to the crowd, and what's really amazing is that Dante said that hell is the hottest for those who choose neutrality, those who choose to sit on the fence, and it's all for evil to triumph is for good people to do and say nothing. And unfortunately, when Donald Trump seized power in this country, I'll say it publicly, like I'm saying it right now. I challenge anyone to play what I'm saying in the future. But he seized power and attempted to hold on to power against every tenet of our Constitution. And people, in my opinion, and I've had these conversations with some intellectual friends of mine, we owe the African American community in this country a great gratitude because they came out in Georgia and voted, and they voted in record numbers.
Yep.
And that is the genius of a democracy because a vote counts the same regardless of how much money you have.
Yep.
And that is what destroyed the Trump machine. Was the African American vote who came out in record numbers and basically did what America is about. And so we owe a great gratitude to the African American community. They have sacrificed, they've suffered, they have been through too much, and they have contributed so much to this country. Veterans, World War II, Vietnam, you can go on and on, doctors, scientists, and we owe a great gratitude for the African American community, in my opinion, because they have done so much to build this country and have gotten so little respect.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed. Sometimes I'm very embarrassed by some white folks who, I'm very embarrassed by actions taken by Donald Trump and by the congressman from Ohio. Freudian slip. I'm not remembering his name right now.
Jim Jordan?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure.
And then for him to get into a lecturing an African American lady congressman from, I think, Florida, who was a actual sheriff in the
Maxine Waters, I think it was. Or is it Val Demings? Val Demings.
Yeah, no, Demings, exactly. And so, again, a great gratitude we owe to the African American community. And I wanted to get that out there, not because you're African American, but I don't see you as an African American, and you don't see me as an Anglo. We see each other as Americans. We see each other as a e pluribus unum. Out of many one, and that's why I think President Obama said it best: "We're not red states, we're not blue states."
I have to explain while I'm smiling, Jim, what you're saying. But every time I think about you, I think about that trick Devin pulled on.
Which was that, Zay?
I have to tell this now. And let the cat out.
I want to hear that. Go ahead.
We've been longtime friends. What this guy did was a mutual friend of ours, Devin.
Oh, yes, Devin Delrose.
Yeah, Devin Delrose. What they did one night was it was a kind of a retaliation for my scaring Keith, because I put up this Frankenstein.
I remember.
Yeah, and so one night what happened was I came I opened the door and it was pitch black. We had a big apartment, actually. Mm-hmm. It was pitch black. But all of a sudden there's this white dude in what I thought was blood coming at me like that with a knife.
That was Devin. I remember that. It was. I think we patterned it after that movie Psycho. It was.
Yeah. I started to run. I thought, wait a minute.
I remember you screaming like. I remember that. I was scared. Honestly, I knew that what he was going to do, and he literally scared the hell out of me. and I had a heads up on what he was going to do. That's fantastic. That's a great.
That was a good one. So he's like droning on about Americans and white and all that. And I'm thinking, I almost died from that. No, I'm just kidding.
Back in those days, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the Insta. We actually had to create things to amuse ourselves, and we played a lot of board games. I think we lived at the what was it? We actually lived at some of those first computer games like Pawn or whatever it was, or the Spaceport, or it was the primitive technology. Yeah, it was the primitive technology, but to us it was an amazing technology. And that really gets us to, we've lived. I think you and I are in the same generation, around the same age.
Yeah.
And we have seen so much different. We have really adapted, haven't we? And our generation has really adapted from little or no computer technology to what we have today. I think our generation will be.
John, you're born in 62, right?
64.
64, okay. But think of it this way, okay? Tom Cruise is still rocking.
That's absolutely. Absolutely he is, and it's just a tribute to his genetics and also taking care of his body like he does. Unfortunately, some people can take care of themselves real well, and they have a gene for diabetes, or they have a gene for something. But with the medical technology that we're advancing today, I think that probably in the future, people will be living probably 85, 95 will probably be the median age.
Yeah.
And I do believe that our generation will be thought of as one of those that had to make the transition between the old America, which was basically predominantly agricultural in mindset, to a new technology driven world. And we had, you know how it was. Computers, Fortran, programming. We didn't know what any of that was until they said, you got to learn this.
Yep.
Now my 2-year-old is over here playing with computers that she's teaching me. My 4-year-old. Let me tell you what she did, Catherine. She went in there in the bedroom the other day, and she turned on. I have a Samsung smart TV, and she took my cell phone that I had no idea that they were compatible. So she's pushing buttons on my cell phone, and I'm watching, I think it was NCAA basketball game. The tournament was going on, and all of a sudden I'm watching Peppa the Pig, and and, and I'm like, what happened here? And she just starts screaming. Now, more power, because I really am going to, just know and enjoy the fact that these children are going to be so far advanced in what we were, and it's fun knowing that they're going to surpass you, and my 4-year-old already has.
And you hit up on this. How much has this changed your profession, this smartphone?
Oh my God, Zenny. I mean, if I had this thing that I'm talking to you on right now, I wouldn't even have to go to school. I do research. Of course, lawyers like me, we do legal research now. We have what's called Westlaw or Lexis subscriptions, and I can, compress legal research now that would have taken me, days off bookshelves and shepherdizing manually, which we were trained in the old days in school. Now, by press of a button and talking to your Westlaw representative, I can have power to what the cases are in the Fifth Circuit or out in the 11th Circuit, and federal cases come up just like that, and I can do my papers very quickly. Yes, this technology is incredible, and it really is, and it's also can be in the wrong hands used very nefariously. And that you and I had spoken here recently about your prediction of the social media and how it was going to negatively impact the elections. And now we see Putin and his crew of thugs over there that are anti-democratic, anti-progressive, authoritarian, use social media to hype up Trump's campaigns.
Yep. Yeah, I had Rick Gates
and you predicted that. You had seen that coming.
Thank you. Yeah, I had Rick Gates as a guest here, and we didn't exactly talk about that, but his book Wicked Game did get into that, and he's written up in the New York Times as at least plotting to buy for $3 million services from a firm called Psy Group to do just that. But back to present day, do you think police, because we have had what seems to be an inordinate number of national police brutality cases captured by smartphone, right? At a dizzying pace. Do you think that the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin verdict will put a chill on police brutality at all? What kind of impact do you think this is going to have on our future?
Well, I believe that I think the question you have to ask yourself is this brutality just now being observed because we have smartphones, or has it always been going on in America?
Well, I can tell you, I'll tell you something happened to me just to help you out, because I'm still traumatized by it. I was coming home from a Balboa Cafe, which I think I may have taken you to when you came out to visit the Bay. Actually, no.
I remember.
Yeah, and now it's actually owned by the governor of California, but I digress. This was in 2006, and there was a guy that, to this day, I have no idea why this guy was tailgating me like he was and changing lanes behind me and following at a high rate of speed and forcing me to go higher. And I'm thinking, this guy's going to get me in trouble. I got to get him off my back. And so I saw a highway patrol officer in the middle of the lane on the east side, lower deck of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. And I got in front of the cop, and I'm doing this. I'm saying, hey, go get the guy. The guy speeds off by me doing 80.
Yeah.
And does the highway patrol officer go after him? No, they stay behind me, get off the bridge, do their lights, ask me to pull over. And the officer says, don't worry. He's acting like he's training someone. He says, don't worry, we're going to have you out of here in no time. And then he gives me a breathalyzer test, and I wasn't drinking much. He says I was over limit. I wasn't. But he asked me to put my hands up, and I'm complying, not being unruly or anything. And he handcuffs me. I'm thinking, seriously? And next thing I know, spontaneously tears come coming down my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And John, he said, "Oh, you gonna do that, honey?" He picked me up and he body slammed me on his squad car.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, and that's exactly the type of miscreant behavior that needs to be weeded out. And one of the I didn't mean to interrupt your story.
hey, just to close that out,
Mhm.
he wrote in the police report that I delayed arrest. And I'm thinking, how did I delay arrest? By being a hood ornament on your car? You know, and
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
so my mom couldn't find me in the jail because they said they told my mother and my step brother-in-law that they didn't have a Zenith Abraham at Santa Rita, and they did. And the way she got help is the inmates said, "You don't belong here because of my character, or whatever." And they said, "We're going to help you out." And that's I mean, I'm serious. So this wasn't over a long period of time. This was like over a day, okay? And so, but I was really supposed to be, if I was actually drunk, it was only supposed to be a 4-hour thing. You know, it's California law. You tell you 4 hours and you get him out of there. But because he wrote what he wrote, I was there for longer. And my mom was saying that the way they had worked it, I would have been there for 14 days until my next court, and or something like that. I think, you know, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's another story. My point is that there are a number there. I have that story from, there was no cell phone to capture it or anything else. On top of that, my attorney was William Dubois. And if anybody knows that name, he was actually the attorney in the Hans Reeser case. Bill's a good friend of mine.
I've heard of the name.
Yeah, he's been a good friend of mine to this day. Happy to introduce you guys. He's in Bend, Oregon now.
Would be honored.
He had the cop come back to court twice. John, the guy never showed up.
No,
Okay?
that's typical of these types of police officers who have done these things. And you know, you can't paint a brush that every officer is like that. Most officers are very noble, very loyal, very good people. But the point that I would like to make in response to what you just said is, and I think that this is one of the main problems, is we have something called qualified immunity. Now, if and that's a legal term, and for your listeners out there, qualified immunity is what protects government officers from being sued civilly. So if you have a police officer, for example, hypothetically speaking, that's acting outside the color of their shield or their law and their power, and you sue them individually, you have to basically demonstrate that their actions were, not only did they rose to the level of not being able to be condoned, but also illicit. It's such a high standard. There's been several cases here recently. There was a case a couple years ago where a Border Patrol agent shot a Hispanic kid across the border. You may have remembered reading about that. The kid had a rock in his hand, and the Border Patrol guy took the kid out with a rifle. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court went ahead and stated that that officer did not lose qualified immunity. It is such a high standard to try to show the fact that the officer not just made a mistake or basically, but had to have such a heart of heart in such a situation where their behavior rose to a level of criminality to the point it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in order to hold them civilly liable. That's why right now a lot of progressive Democrats that I agree with are trying to enact legislation that will lower the bar of being able to go after police officers, such as the one in Minnesota. And I won't mention his name because if I mention his name, it only gives him more credence. That type of situation should rise to a level to losing your qualified immunity. But the qualified immunity has been the defense for these bad apples in the policing world, and because of that, it leads to more bad apples because you can't hold them civilly liable. It's like the Ford Pinto. If we weren't able to hold Ford liable for the defective gas tank that was in the Ford Pinto many years ago, Ford would never have made the changes it had to make in order to make the vehicles more safe. But for some unknown reason, the Republican Party continues to hold on to the idea that we should give blanket absolute immunity to law enforcement. I think that is an archaic way of thinking, because it's led to more situations like you just described that happened to you. And unfortunately, there's more of those cases than people would like to admit.
What do you think will happen? What do you think the judge will do with Chauvin? Because this is an unprecedented situation. Do you think he'll get the full 40 years?
I think that the judge is going to, and I can't speak for the judge, obviously, but take it into consideration of the fact that the officer had basically extinguished the man's life, and did so in front of an entire spectacle of other people. I think that you have to look at, you can't allow someone to become the judge, jury, and executioner. And that's exactly what this officer had become. To a certain minor degree, we're talking about, bad officers. And I was thinking back in the day when I was prosecuting, and that goes back a long time ago. But I remember one specific case where I was prosecuting for the government, and there was a Hispanic gentleman who was pulled over, allegedly doing 56 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone, and then was arrested for DWI. I asked for the DWI evidence, I asked for the videos, asked for the reports, everything, and they all disappeared. So I explained to the arresting officer that I was going to be dismissing the case based on lack of evidence. I remember going into the courtroom, this is 25 years ago, and I told the judge I was going to dismiss the case and based on behalf of the state. And I remember the judge clearly asking me what was the reason, and I said DWH. And the judge looked at me, and everyone in the courtroom looked at me. I was in a very conservative place at the time. I won't say where, but it was somewhere in Central Texas. And I said, DWH means robbing while Hispanic. And of course, that made me a very popular person in that jurisdiction. But justice requires that you step up to the plate and not be the popular person, but to do what's required under the Constitution. And that is exactly why it's important for our elected officials, our prosecutors, our judges to always uphold the Constitution. The Constitution is what we uphold. I did not swear an oath to Donald Trump. I did not swear an oath to Donald Trump's friends. I swore an oath to uphold the United States Constitution. And that is what we have to remember when we're looking at it. And the most common example is the lieutenant colonel that was written out of the Army because he followed the Constitution. And he testified truthfully as to what occurred in his chain of command. And he was written out of the Army because Trump at that point didn't appreciate the fact that he didn't defend him, but he defended the Constitution. So unfortunately, that rogue that did you the way he did, that person is an individual who doesn't understand the Constitution. Matter of fact, that person that did that to you should be inside a jail cell, in my opinion. Yeah. And unfortunately, you being African American, this has been going on for generations. And I think that the cell technology that you're talking about, the video technology, it's catching these types of situations. But I think they've always been going on. I think, unfortunately, it's a sad part of the American history. But I do believe that the newer generation, the younger generation that's coming up, I think is going to reverse this systemic racism that has been poison to this country. And it needs to stop. And we can do it in our own individual homes by what we teach our children. We can do it in our own individual communities by what we tell our kids and our friends. But it starts at home. And I apologize for the fact that you had to go through such a horrific thing. Knowing you like I know you all my life, you're the most responsible individual, except when we're playing, talking about Star Wars and Star Trek and trying to figure out what lines. But again, I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear that story from you, Zinni. It really breaks my heart.
No, like I said, it's trauma. I think the Lord pointed me in the direction of starting my own media company because I actually talk about it. And one day I'm going to get the guy's name and I'm going to start broadcasting it because we live in a Me Too era, but Me Too doesn't just apply to white women; it applies to black guys too. And we've got to tell our stories about what's happened to us and flood the society with a true picture of what we've gone through and move forward. I want to ask you for your opinion about the Deshaun Watson situation. I'm going to assume maybe you're not that familiar with it, but
no, I haven't been keeping up with that situation. I read a little bit on the internet, but I really am not really up on what's happening in the case.
Yeah, I'm going to try to give it from a broad kind of legal what Tony Busby did kind of deal. I just want your opinion on his approach and what he did. And well, first of all, Watson's a Houston Texans quarterback. He was about a year ago now. Watson was quite upset that the Texans didn't have African American management. Made it known. Said he wanted to be traded. Wanted to be a part of the decision-making process in hiring a coach. I texted, I can say this now, Jamie Roots has been a friend of mine for a long time. He was the president of Texas. He recently resigned. And I texted Jamie, I said, look, that guy's worth $2 billion to you guys. Don't let him get out the door. Mm-hmm. And what happened all of a sudden was Tony Busby's gives a announcement that he's going to file these multiple lawsuits against Watson. I'm thinking this time he's suspicious. And then what he does is, let's say that you and I are driving along and we're hit by an 18-wheeler, a big rig, and we survive and we file a lawsuit. That lawsuit's going to include my name, your name, and whoever was with us. So that's going to be one. Well, what Busby did was he took these, what would be one lawsuit, ostensibly with different women involved, ostensibly, and he cut them up and filed them separately so that they're giant press releases. And the media has been, putting these things out there. Now, I checked Tony Busby's background, and he has a history of doing this. And you know this better than I do in terms of how this type of personal injury lawyer works. But
no, I really, let me say this. I really can't really comment on what goes on because I really don't know nothing about that specific case or this gentleman. So, yeah, I'd rather not discuss that because it would be irresponsible for me to do so. Okay. But again, the thing of it is that, yes, those types of cases are very, very, have to be handled very, very delicately, especially when you make an accusation against anyone. And once that accusation is out there, it destroys your reputation.
Yeah.
And then it puts you into a position where you have to defend yourself. And again, those are very, very tough cases, especially when they get tried in the news media, before anyone's had a chance to actually go into a court, take depositions, be able to, show the evidence to a jury. And unfortunately, in not knowing what's going on in this specific case and not being able to comment on it, you would basically hope that the facts of the case would come out in the court and not out in the news media through leaks and those types of things. I've always believed that the case should be tried in the courtroom, not in the press. And I think that is the most important thing is for people to get a fair trial and a fair shake. And when you get an accusation made against you without having the evidence actually being examined by a fact finder in a courtroom, it can lead to some very, very bad situations. So I'm just not really up on this case, and it wouldn't
No,
be appropriate for me
that's
to
the
make
answer. That's the response I was looking for, because you know enough, not to say certain things, but also to give give our viewers a picture of how a case should be done. Because like Gloria Allwood's a friend of mine. I've interviewed her 6 times now, and she always brings her clients to me to interview. Right? There's not a Jane Doe, and the people are accessible. Like, remember General Petraeus and his
Yes,
mistress?
of course.
I interviewed
Reading
I interviewed her.
wow. Yeah, I tell you what. Well, I don't know why you got me on this show, but I tell you what, I'm in some good company with the folks you've interviewed. I really am honored that you had me on tonight.
Oh, hey, man, I got what case are you working on that you want the folks to know about?
Well, I've got so many that I'm working on right now, and I can only talk about what's been publicly filed. I have some very interesting cases involving insurance companies and involving individuals who have been terminated because they made First Amendment statements and I'll go into that a little bit. It's the L.A. Garcetti. It's the Garcetti case that came out of the Supreme Court about 10 years ago. I think this is a very interesting case for you. Our Garcetti opinion, as we all know, Garcetti now is the mayor of Los Angeles. Garcetti before that was the district attorney there in that area. Garcetti had fired one of his assistant district attorneys, and this is from my memory from reading the case. The district attorney had written some report concerning one of the employees in the office, stating that they were basically corrupt, had issues going on, and that they needed to be investigated. This individual was fired that worked for Garcetti, and this individual brought a lawsuit under USC 1983, USC 42, Section 1983, and stated that he was terminated for retaliation of his free speech. Now, this case, Garcetti, is a very important case, and there's been a progeny of cases afterwards. But what it basically stood for is that if I'm an employee that works for a governmental entity, and I speak, or I write some speech, or I say some speech that is part of my job description, then that is not protected free speech. This is what the Garcetti case did. It restricted, or it went ahead and defined that if you're speaking as a citizen on matters of public concern, that is protected free speech. Let's say I work for a bus company, and let's say my supervisor for bus company, I believe, is involved in some sort of money laundering scheme, and I report that person to the Attorney General's office. Well, if I get fired, that would be protected free speech, because my job description has nothing to do with writing reports about my superior for the bus company, or hypothetically speaking, money laundering, allegedly. So that would be protected free speech. But if my job was an assistant district attorney, and I'm writing a report about someone who's allegedly corrupt, and then I get fired, the Supreme Court said that individual employee was writing as part of his job description, and that was not protected free speech. The courts are able to delineate and define these types of fine lines, and they're very important because they do make a big difference in the cases. Another case I'm working on has to do with political retaliation for perceived political support. The Hefferman case happened back in 2000, and I believe it was 2014, 2012, somewhere in that area. The Hefferman case had to do with a Detroit police officer who picked up a political sign and his mother's house, and took the sign over to, I believe, let me get this right. He picked up the sign. Yeah, he picked up the sign at a campaign headquarters of the mayor's opponent, then took it to his mother's house. He was seen by his superiors at the police department, and he was fired. Now, what's interesting is Hefferman said, and his argument was, hey, I wasn't supporting the opponent. I wasn't supporting my boss's opponent. I was just taking a sign to my mother's house. Okay, and so the Supreme Court
He was pulling a Ryan Lochte.
and then exactly. And the Supreme Court, in the most interesting decision, came up with the opinion that it doesn't make any difference whether or not Heffernan was campaigning for the mayor's opponent. It's what the opponent, or excuse me, it's what the mayor and his supporters thought he was doing. And so you may not be campaigning for someone and be thought to have been campaigning for someone, and that's protected free speech. And if you're motivated to terminate someone based on that, the Supreme Court said you can have an active case that can succeed. So these cases turn on the finest little details, and you have to really stay up. Like on the qualified immunity issue, that's going to be a big one in all the circuit courts around the country. There's a case coming up on the qualified immunity again pretty soon, and then the federal Congress is thinking about legislating qualified immunity or defining what it is and what it isn't. And I would expect a big fight that would be coming from the Republicans if that happened. I'm sure they would challenge that legislation as unconstitutional. But again, it's still important for people to vote, to get out and vote, because the people who get appointed to federal positions come from the executive branch of government, which is the president. So Trump was able to appoint a bunch of judges when he was in office. Matter of fact, there was 3 Supreme Court judges that was appointed by Trump in a 4-year. That's never happened, Zinni.
No.
That's never happened. That's never happened. 3 Supreme Court judges. Now people say, well, John, do we do a Supreme Court packing plan? Should we go back to should we go back to Roosevelt and try to pack the Supreme Court? And and as tempting as it might be to do so, if not that anyone would listen to my advice, because I'm down here in South Texas, but I would advise any political operative not to try to pack the court, because once you start doing things like that, then there's no end in sight. One side has to stop the foolishness. And I believe that in order to create more judges to put on the Supreme Court, what would the difference be between a legislature and the Supreme Court? Yeah. You might wind up with 40, 50, 60. Where does it stop? So I think that we need to realize that the best thing to do is get out and vote. And we need, instead of increasing the numbers of the Supreme Court, we need to actually delineate who it is that we elect. And I am afraid that some of the, I believe it's the Supreme Court judges with Justice Ginsburg, for example, which one of my heroes. Justice Ginsburg wrote so many great opinions, a true advocate for women, a true advocate for the little person, and just amazing. And I thought it was a tragedy how she was replaced, and in the manner that it happened.
Do you know that Amy Coney Barrett's got a book coming out already?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was announced yesterday.
Had no idea. I'm going to start tuning into your show more often so I can go ahead and learn this stuff. I had no idea that was coming out.
I'm going to talk about it more, but you're learning here first on this show. But yeah, it came out yesterday. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I really think that what happened to Justice Ginsburg and the way the Republicans shamefully tried to force through the appointment after the Republicans indicated and Senator down in South Carolina, I'm trying to remember his name, but anyway, Lindsey Graham had said that he would never push through a Supreme Court nomination when there was a lame duck and shame in that time, and then in turn turns around and does exactly what he said he wasn't going to do. I really think that had a devastating effect on the Republicans in the elections. and had 2 Democrats elected in Georgia. Never happened before. I have relatives in Georgia who are Anglo folks who voted Democratic for the first time.
Wow.
And these folks voted Democratic because they didn't like the attacks that were personal attacks that Perdue was doing on the Reverend and the vicious. I just think that all that backfired on the Republicans when they pushed the Supreme Court judge in that time period. And politics is a strange game.
I got a question for you, and I'll let you go because I've been out for an hour. You got a baby to take care of.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have you back though. This is
whenever I can substitute for somebody that's famous and they have a schedule and call, you can always use me as a substitute. Go ahead.
You got it. But you, John, you're and was listening to you. I was thinking about how you talked about wanting to be a country lawyer, and you are, and that's amazing. You always said you wanted to help the little guy, and gal, and that was going back to our 20s. Our early 20s, and it's beautiful to see. You've done it. You made it happen.
I have been very lucky. I've been very fortunate, and I attribute my success to people like you and friends, because you guys were always there supporting me. Your mom was supporting me. You always, listened. You guys nurtured me. And I tried to do the same for you guys too, but I probably didn't do as good. But you guys were always there, and we've had so many years that we've lost because you're going chasing your dream and succeeding in the media market and making a name for yourself. I'm so proud of you for what you've done and what you've been able to accomplish. And now, since we've reconnected, we're not going to lose touch now. I want you to meet my family. I want you to come here. I want you to stay at my house. I want you. When the COVID's almost over with, hopefully in the next year or whatever it is, and don't get me on that one, politicizing COVID.
We got
no subject on that one. But no, I mean, I'm a country lawyer. I enjoy helping little people. I enjoy the intellectual part of it. I enjoy knowing I can equalize the playing field. And, even though I may be going against a multi-billion-dollar corporation, the greatest equalizer is a 12-member jury.
Hey, let's keep talking backstage, John. But folks, if you want to contact this man, all you have to do is you have his information, and if you need a great lawyer in South Texas, this is the man, John Shergold. John, stick around in the backstage.
I sure will, and thank you everybody out there tonight, and it's been an honor to be on Mr. Abraham's show.
And John, stick around, folks. That ends this broadcast, but we'll be back.